Okay, so real quick, I want to talk about the exercise part of this lab. So pretty much for this exercise, what's going to happen is we're going to basically build upon the last experiment one, and pretty much what's going to happen is um, we're going to add two LEDs onto the code and onto the system, and pretty much what's going to happen is that um, what we're basically going to put in two commands, right? A command string, and they're going to control those two LEDs. So using those two LEDs is going to, it's basically going to tell the LED what to do. So, for example, if I put in the command string LED on, it's going to turn the LED on. And if I tell another command to do LED off, then it's going to turn the LED off, right? And again, it's going to be for two LEDs, LED1 and LED2. So it's basically going to be predefined command strings. So those predefined command strings are essentially going to be LED1, right? LED1 on. So it's going to be LED1 on, and this is basically going to tell the LED to turn on. So LED turns on. Then it's going to be LED1 off. And yep, you guessed it, the LED is going to turn off. The LED turns off. And it's going to be the same thing for LED2, right? So yeah. So yeah, that's pretty much the predefined commands. So yeah, that's pretty much all we're going to do. So we're basically going to use Termite, the software Termite, to essentially enter those commands and tell the LEDs what to do. So yeah, let's get into the code now. Okay, so before we get into the code of the experiment, I will leave a link in the description above for the setup functions. And these setup functions are important because again, pretty much they tell us or they're essentially setting up the components that we need, right? So they're obviously important. In that video, I will talk about the setup for the UART, for the GPIO, and for the PWM. So I will leave that link in the description below. So yeah, so let's get into the code for for exercise one. So pretty much for exercise one, right, we first initialize some variables here that we're going to use throughout the code. So that's what I did here. I initialized a couple variables. Then for exercise one, I essentially had to establish this piece of code, which is essentially an if statement and is an if statement and a state machine. So pretty much what this first line here is telling us is that if the FIFO is empty, if it's full, then we read it until it's empty. So that's pretty much what it's telling us. And then this next line here is basically saying to read the character from the UART from the data register. And then we have our state machine, right? And then the first case is the S idle. So in that case, pretty much what we have to do is we've set an if statement saying that if the character is the same as the start character, right? And above, I had defined what our start character, our return character, and our new line character was. So our start character was the plus, our return character was the /r, and our new line character was our /n. So yeah, so that's pretty much what I did. So pretty much that's this line here saying if the start character is the same thing as the start character, then pretty much what we have to do is we have to go on to the next state, and then and then this piece of code tells us how many characters we have. So yeah, so then the next case again is our s got data, right? So pretty much in that case, it's saying if the index number is bigger than the buffer size, which is basically a lot of data is received, but the but the stop data isn't, then go back, right? So it's saying basically go back to the S idle or to the previous state or the previous case. And then it's saying else if the else if the character is plus, then clear the buff, right? So that's essentially what we're doing here. We're clearing the buff. And then for the next one, it's saying that if the character is the /n, then the command, then do the command and go back, right? So that's pretty much what I'm saying. So the do command function, which I will talk about in a little bit. Or actually, let's do that right now. Let's talk about the do command. The do command is essentially the command that essentially we're going to establish in, or that's going to essentially happen, right? So those are the commands that are going to be sent out to the component, and essentially it's going to tell us what is essentially going to tell the the circuit, or I mean the Tiva board, to light on the LED, to turn it off, and all that stuff. So that's basically what our do command function is. So yeah, so basically saying if when the character is the new line, then do the command function, right? So do the command that it's telling you to do, and then else if the return character, then set it to null, right? And then pretty much store it to the buffer. And yeah, that's basically what we're doing here, just storing the character to the buffer. And yeah, so that's pretty much our code for that. And that state machine is pretty vital for us to use, because that's pretty much what's going to allow us to print out the or do the commands and essentially give back that response call, right? So yeah. So then, yeah, okay, so now let's get into our do command. So essentially in our do command, I set up two LEDs here, right, using pointers. Again, from previous experiments, we know how to do that from previous labs. And then in our do command function, I have set up a couple of initialized variables. Some of these variables I am going to use in exercise 2. So yeah, stay tuned for that. But yeah, so pretty much I have, if the string that I enter says LED on, then the LED is going to turn on, and it's going to print out the response, right? And that response is going to be able to respond, or it's going to be able to send that string response through the UART print string, right? So yeah, at the end I'll talk about the UART print string. So pretty much what's happening is I'm doing basically the same process, turning off the LED. Yeah, so it's pretty much the same process for LED 1 and LED 2. So that's pretty much what I'm doing, right? It's basically just LED 2. If the string that I enter is LED 2, then turn it on, and then if the string that I enter is LED 2 off, then turn the second LED off, etc. And it's basically just repeating the same thing, but just for on and off for both LEDs. So yeah, and then for our print, for our UART print string function, right? Pretty much for that, for the print string function, all that's saying is that I have a couple initialized variables, right? And then we have this while loop, which will continue to repeat the string multiple times if the tx is equal to the tx5, which is full. But yeah, that's pretty much it. So that's essentially our print string, right? That's our print string function. So yeah, so now let's see what that looks like, what that actually looks like when I implement it and I start putting in the commands and essentially sending the commands to the Tiva board. So yeah, let's get to it. Let's look at the results.
So now let's look at the results for exercise 1. So pretty much for this exercise, what was supposed to happen was that in this termite window here, when I input a command, it's supposed to turn on the LED of my board, these two LEDs right here, these are the last two LEDs. It's supposed to, so either LED 1 or LED 2 is supposed to turn off and on using when I input the commands into the termite window here. So let's see that happen, right? Okay, so first, right, I'm going to input plus. So whenever we input something into the termite window, we always have to put plus, right? So plus LED 1 on, right? So I'm going to try to hold this. So yeah, pretty much, right, we're going to input that, and this LED is going to turn on. One of the LEDs is going to turn on. So LED 1 on. See, one of them turned on. Now we're going to do the same thing for LED 2. So let's turn on LED 2. Let's turn on both of them. LED 2 on. And you'll see that it turns on. So LED 2 on. See? The other LED turned on. Okay. Now let's turn them off. So let's put LED 1 off. See, now the first LED is off, and now I'm gonna turn on I'm gonna turn off the second one. LED 2 off, and as soon as I click that, the LED turns off, as you can see. So yeah, that's pretty much it. So again, it's just inputting commands into this termite window, getting some response commands as to what is happening, right? As what's happening on the board here, and essentially doing the command, which is turning it off. So yeah, is pretty much it. That's pretty much all that was supposed to happen.